Hi, my name is Rose Hutchison. As you may have heard on our last episode, ClimateVibes founder and previous host, Kaya Sakamoto, is moving on and sharing her talents with other amazing projects. We here at the Climate Music Project will miss her dearly and are incredibly grateful for her hard work and generous spirit. Maddie Young and I will be your new hosts for the foreseeable future. We are thrilled to be here with you and are excited to carry on Kaya's legacy and the important work of this podcast. This episode, I met with Dr. Andy Jones and Melecio Estrella to discuss art in the climate movement. Dr. Jones is a staff scientist in the Climate and Ecosystem Sciences Division at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, where he leads the Earth Systems and Society program domain. He is the hydroclimate theme lead for LBL's Water Energy Resilience Research Institute and the Resilient Systems Grand Challenge lead for the Earth and Environmental Sciences Strategic Vision. He previously served as the deputy director of the Climate Readiness Institute. Melecio Estrella is the artistic director of Bandaloop, a world-renowned dance company and pioneer in the field of vertical performance. Bandaloop seamlessly weaves dynamic physicality, intricate choreography, and climbing technology to turn the dance floor on its side. Bandaloop reimagines dance, activates public spaces, and inspires wonder and imagination in audiences around the world. In addition to his work with Bandaloop, Melecio co-directs the dance theater company Fog Beast and is a longtime member of the Joe Good Performance Group. Andy and Melecio currently live in the Bay Area with their 6-year-old son. My name is Rose Hutchison, and you're listening to Climate Vibes, a podcast by the Climate Music Project. Amazing. Well, so happy to have you guys here. We'll jump right in. I know these are crazy times. What are you both working on right now?
Besides being part-time kindergarten teachers, I'm working on.
He says that because we have a 6-year-old son.
I did hear that. Yeah, and you're doing, I'm sure, homeschool.
We're not like literally.
It took me a 1 second to realize what you were talking about. I was like, that's incredibly impressive.
Yeah. So no, yes, it's true that, but a lot of our time during the day is going to doing math worksheets and sight reading, sight words.
I love that.
Yeah. So my work recently, in recent years, I've been really focused on the resiliency of our water, energy, urban, agricultural systems. And now that, we're in a point in history where climate change is happening and our systems are beginning to be affected by the environmental change, there's a lot of interest from the stakeholder community, from the resource management community, on how they can use science to understand the ways that things are changing in a more detailed way, understand uncertainties, et cetera. And so a lot of my work has been focused on engaging with practitioners to understand their information needs and use that as a feedback process to drive how we're innovating on the science and new modeling approaches, that sort of thing. So it's a really nice kind of combination of talking to people, learning about their problems, and then translating that into science.
Absolutely. And is all of this happening from home? Do you get to go into the?
Not for the last year. I think soon, perhaps we'll be going to the lab. But yeah, it's all Zoom these days.
Wow, that's impressive. What about you, Melecio? What have you been up to?
I've I'm working on a lot of things. I'm like, which should I talk about? So my background is in dance and performance. Mm-hmm. I've been spending, I've had a pretty long career making dance works for the theater and a lot of non-traditional venues, outdoors and such. So that's been, I've been following that thread. The pandemic has has affirmed the wonderfulness of working outdoors. And so all of my work right now is pouring into that. And that manifests in a few ways these days. One of them is working with my company, Bandaloop. It's a site-specific vertical dance company. We use rock climbing technology to dance on the sides of walls, making highly public, and we like to say radically accessible dance. So it's for everyone to see. There's no ticket price.
It's fantastic.
It's on the street. It's public art. Right now, looking at the rope craft. So it's a marriage of rock climbing and dance, contemporary dance and other dance forms that started by our founder, Amelia Rudolph, in 1991. And so what I'm interested in right now is the actual ropes, the rope crafts, the lineage of rope craft, and that the ropes themselves are a technological textile made out of nylon. I'm also a fiber artist and very interested in the ancestral roots of textile traditions, juxtaposing that with the ecological impacts of fabric and textile production, and specifically in the fashion industry and sustainability movements in the fashion industry. So when I have this big vertical wall with many ropes going down, running vertically, it starts to resemble a loom, gigantic loom. So I'm working on a piece that really looks at textiles, many facets of textile. It's a wide, wide world. But I think our approach is really focusing in on both sustainability movements and the cultural roots of and spiritual roots of fabric making. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I have to say, I looked you both up, obviously, before emailing you initially, and incredibly intimidated, just because the work you both do is very, very neat. So that's fantastic. You kind of just touched on it, but because Bandaloop is not primarily an environmental organization, but his work is firmly connected to the environment it's being performed on, can you talk about this environmental element, how it relates to, honoring nature and how that kind of plays into your art at all?
Sure, yeah. So it's a 30-year organization, and I've been with the organization for 17 years, been artistic director for the last 1.5 years. And how it started was through really rock climbing and dance and outdoor in the mountains, dancing. The founder, Amelia, she realized that her climbing practice informed her dance practice and vice versa. And part of climbing and part of that culture is being in these mountainous spaces and these awe-inspiring, the expanse of the mountain, the geology of the rock, the flora and the fauna, these protected, conserved spaces. So that's really deep in the DNA of the practice of Bandaloop. And like I was saying, we work outdoors and in public space all the time. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we're in contact and dancing. To say we dance on, but more accurately, we dance with the elements and the surfaces. And whether we're in a wild space on a mountain or in an urban space on the side of a glass building, we're encountering wind, we're encountering weather, and we're kind of in that threshold, in that in-between space between kind of the sidewalk reality and the sky dream reality, mm-hmm. All encompassed in the natural environment or the built environment. So I guess I'm rambling to say that unlike other dance companies, we're not in a box, in a theater, in a studio, right? We are always interacting with the elements, the people, the public space, the the nature. That's a humbling place to be. And in order to feel good in the process, we feel like there has to be a sort of reverence, or the reverence just comes, I guess. The reverence comes, and that's how the process of the work honors nature.
Dr. Andy Jones was one of the first members of the ClimateMusic Project's Science Advisory Committee and has remained a dedicated and integral part of the Science Advisory Committee team since the project's founding. Andy or Dr. Jones, I don't know whichever you prefer. Would you mind just touching on, what led you to our organization and why you chose to get involved and what's that kind of looked like?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think it came about because I guess Stefan was asking around with some contacts that he had at Berkeley Lab, and someone suggested me as a person to talk to. And as soon as I heard the concept, I was, immediately fascinated. Music is such an intuitive mode of engagement, and so yeah, I just immediately, I signed up right away and met with Stefan, and one thing led to another. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, so that takes me into what ways do you feel the work that you both do overlapping, both the arts work and the climate work, and obviously you have a partnership in more ways than one. So how do you feel your work overlapping?
Well, I think that our work has, on the surface, you might think, science and art are very different things, but I think that we're both very motivated by a deep curiosity and this sense of investigation and bringing that curiosity to go deeper on a topic. And we're both working in this space of, how do we relate to our environment? How do we relate to larger systems that we find ourselves within? In what ways does that make us vulnerable to, fluctuations and extremes within the environment? In what ways does that kind of create a sense of responsibility and that we have an impact on the world around us? How do we conceptualize that relationship? So those are just a few thoughts on some commonalities.
I think that the way we both work also arises in collaboration in teams, and so something that I'm always learning from Andy is around, that sort of iterative team process, the collaborative process. And, there's so much that his work informs my work in that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really like the curiosity thing. I agree. And also yeah, absolutely. How, I guess this, either one of you could answer. How can we better nurture the connection between the arts and climate science from either side? A loaded question, I realize.
Yeah, I often think, I participated in this series of workshops at the Headland Center for the Arts on kind of science and art around the topic of climate change. And, coming out of that, it was interesting to see, examples of science feeding into art and art feeding into science. So like artists who are inspired by some scientific finding or fact that inspires their imagination and they go somewhere with it. And on the flip side, scientists who want to think creatively about their problems or who want to, use more effective means of communication. But I think where it's also really interesting is that kind of collaborative, not really science for art or art for science, but science and art together working on a problem. And I think that's a really fruitful place to bring our attention to. And and how do you do that? I guess you find that common ground, you find that common intersection of where is the curiosity line, and facilitate the conversations. I think people will take it from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I exist often in this world of like production and show making and art, like making a big product as a performance, as in a performance. But there's so much to be said for process, for art process as a tool to be placemaking, to help communities connect not only to each other but to their landscape. So as an educator, I'm really looking right now at um, at the intersection of outdoor education, sort of like summer campy outdoor education, and performing arts education or experiential dance and somatic work, and then also intersecting that with equity work and access. So I'm really interested in the application of art process to communities, in addition to the work of making big shows and touring them.
Okay, I have a fun word association game, if that's okay to play. It's a fun rap engaged. I'll say a word, you guys say what the first word pops into your brain. Each of you, sound good?
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I know. I'm sorry, I'm throwing this at you. Low stakes, I promise we can. Okay, first word, planet.
Round.
Great answer.
Growth.
What was that? Sorry.
Growth.
Awesome. I can tell one of you is running a kindergarten, and it's great. It's second word, climate.
On my skin.
Intuition.
Science.
Elegance.
Evidence.
Ooh, that was very nice. That alliteration. All right, and last one, connection.
Tendril.
Network.
Absolutely, that was perfect. Amazing job, both of you. You won the game. Thank you so much. I have just one last question for you. For either one of you, where do you see the future of the climate movement headed? And where do you think we should be focusing our efforts?
Well, I think particularly in the context of this conversation that we're having about science and art, we're at a point where we know a lot scientifically about what's happening to the climate and humans' role in it. And it seems that, in terms of a movement, as a group of concerned people who want to see us take a wise path forward, that what we need is ways of engaging with the problem that speak to our whole humanness, that speak to our values and our identities and our emotions.
Here we took a quick pause so that Andy and Melecio could fulfill their very important roles as kindergarten teachers.
Right. So where was I? Yeah. So just that, in this moment that, the limitations aren't our knowledge of the scientific reality. Of course, we need more science to, understand the details and get down to business with adapting our water system, adapting our energy system, and see what happened in Texas with the electricity grid. Mm-hmm. But what seems to be what's holding us back is sort of a crisis of imagination and a crisis of storytelling, that we need to be able to imagine a future pathway forward. What is that future that we want to get to? And that has to be informed by, what is the option space now, scientifically, but it has to be informed by our values and what we want, and what we can articulate as something that we're working towards.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything to add?
Yeah, no, that was really elegant. I I'm no theorist or academic on, movements such as the climate movement, but I do think that, there's big actions that we can take, that we are, some of us are engaging in, as far as moving big ideas in big ways, to touch a lot of people. And I think it's equally important to talk to our families, like where the bridges are, the personal bridges for storytelling, that exist, across cultural divides. Really, and that's maybe one of the more challenging places is how do I talk to my uncle, my Republican uncle? How do I talk to, my children about this, and my community? So, yeah, in some ways, I feel like that's an open question and a curious place for me. It's where the personal communication can serve this movement.
Absolutely. Yeah. Starting from home and then branching out from there. 110%. That concluded my interview with Dr. Andy Jones and Melecio Estrella. Thank you again to both Andy and Melecio for taking the time to speak with me, as well as to Poddington Bear for the use of their song Tender and Curious. You've been listening to Climate Vibes, a podcast by the ClimateMusic Project, an organization that works to communicate a sense of urgency about the climate crisis by combining climate science with the emotional power of music to drive meaningful action. Check us out at climatemusic.org. My name is Rose Hutchison. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more episodes.